I'm always in a God-given position that when honor is described, it's almost universally a relationship word. It's got to do with an exchange of relationship. And if it says anything more profound than just admitting that this is a relationship that God has set up, it's got rules that govern it, and I have to, in order to please God, I have to do what the scripture tells me to do inside this relationship.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Created to Learn. And I was really looking forward to this one particular conversation because I find it's very fitting, especially the time that we're living now, because I understand that for many of us, there's an entirely new generation that's growing up, and I don't want to get into too many conversations about that, but I've asked Pastor David McGrew to come on the show today because I just really feel that this topic that we're going to be talking about honor today, because I just feel that it's a very timely message, and a lot of people may consider it as an old-fashioned notion, but I really feel that it's very fitting and very important, I think, for all of us to understand this important subject of honor. And anyways, I had asked Pastor David to come on and talk to us a little bit about that. So, welcome to the show, Pastor David.
It's a wonderful opportunity to be here with you, Alec. I always enjoy talking to you. I like the way you think. I mean, like created to learn. That's pretty impressive right there, young fella.
It's been so insightful, just hearing other people's ideas, other people's knowledge and wisdom, and their understanding of the scriptures, and even just life in general. That we are all created, we're all mandated to become something, and learning is a very important aspect of that.
I think I think learning is why we're on the planet. I think
Right.
we're supposed to learn as long as we live,
Yeah.
and I think that there's no seam in between this life and the next life. I think we take what we've learned, who we've become, into the next life with us. So
Yeah.
go to school here, might learn
So,
some lessons there.
right.
Yeah.
I Well, I just really appreciate you, Pastor, for agreeing to come on again, because I knew that from our last time together, I just knew for a fact that I wanted to have you back, because I was just so impressed and so challenged by the words that you spoke to us. And not only that, because I know that you have also spoken at our Church of Faith Live here in Saskatoon, and you also spoke at my Bible college graduation.
I did. I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was so great. I really do appreciate that. But Pastor, I wanna just dive right into today's topic, because I know that I had sent you an email earlier about just talking about the subject of honor. Now, I just want to ask you for a few minutes, maybe just describe in your own words, like what is honor?
Okay. Alec, you do keep it in mind that by inclination and occupation, I'm a teacher. So
Hmm.
if I get tedious or too long, poke me. Take the narrative back so we can
Right.
get the direction you
That's
want.
fine. Yep. Yep.
But uh, probably one of the fundamental truths that I believe needs to be grasped by all of us is that honor and respect are not interchangeable words. They're two different ideas.
Hmm.
And we know this because it says in Romans chapter 13 to give respect to whom respect is due. And the next clause, or the previous clause, says, and give honor to whom honor is due.
Yep.
So there are two different topics. So if we look at them, we can measure them by the scripture, like it says in Ephesians 6. It's the first commandment with a promise. Children, honor your parents in the Lord, for it's the first commandment with a promise, that it might be well with you and you'll live long on the earth.
Yeah, that's right.
So we can see in that verse right there that it's a choice. It's something that you're told to do, whereas respect really has to be earned.
Hmm.
And because we confuse these two things, I think we set ourselves up to stumble a lot, because I might be a bad authority figure. I might be a bad parent. I might be a bad husband. Might not be living up to my standards. but I'm still a husband. I'm still a father. I'm still a pastor.
That's right.
And when I fail, I don't really deserve respect for having failed. Somebody could come along and say, you need to correct this, and they should come along and say that. But I'm always in a God-given position that when honor is described, it's almost universally a relationship word. So it says, husbands, honor your wives. So husbands are mentioned, wives are mentioned. Children, honor your parents.
That's right.
Honor God with the first fruits of your substance. So it's got to do with an exchange of relationship.
Hmm.
And if it says anything more profound than just admitting that this is a relationship that God has set up, it's got rules that govern it, and I have to, in order to please God, I have to do what the Scripture tells me to do inside this relationship. The beautiful thing is, uh, when you respect somebody, maybe they get the benefit out of it, they get the self-esteem. But when you honor someone, it opens up heaven's gates for you to receive the benefit. Back to children again.
Yep.
Honor your parents in the Lord so you get to live long and prosper. It doesn't help your parents at all. You get the benefit for it. So even if my mom and dad were not a particularly great mom and dad, they were, but let's suppose they were human, and it was a different world. So they wouldn't measure up to today's standards of what a good parent was supposed to be. My teachers from the 1960s wouldn't measure up to what the world thinks is a good teacher today, but they were still good teachers in the context they lived in, and they required my honor. The difference between now and today, perhaps, is that they insisted on it. They insisted they were honored. So there's benefit to it.
Yeah, for sure. I, I want to just kind of back up for a few moments because I'm really glad that you highlighted it already at this point in the conversation because I really find, especially nowadays, and I'm not exactly sure what you've seen, whether it be on the news or social media. I see it a lot on social media, and it's this whole idea of honoring your mother and your father. And if there's one thing that I've understood, and it was, growing up, you read a lot of it, even in the Bible. It's actually considered as one of the Ten Commandments, right?
That's
Is
correct.
honor your father and your mother. So maybe if you can just kind of paint a picture for us, especially, especially to even to our viewers, because I know that there might be some younger people that may be watching, is what does honoring your father and mother look like?
That is a great question.
Mm.
Uh, Alec, I would dare say, if I'm not being presumptuous, that you probably grew up in a culture that honor was a big part of,
Mm.
where the elders were honored because they were elders,
Yep.
and whether they were perfect or not, they had a perceived position because of their age and because of their experience that required you to relate to them in a certain fashion, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And that's largely missing today in a world where every generation clamors to be equal with every other generation,
Mm.
where children speak to adults like either the adults were children themselves or the children were adults. That's not just blurring the line, that's destroying the bridge that exists between the two relationships, because there's no way a 10 or a 12-year-old has the wisdom and experience of a 40 or a 50-year-old.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't make either one of them perfect or imperfect. It's just the nature of the case.
Hmm.
So there's examples in the Scripture. Jesus gave the example of not taking money and giving it to God when you're supposed to use it to honor or care for your parents. So it's got an element of deference to it. It's
Yep.
got an element of care to it. The very basic nature of it is seen in a person's relationship with the Lord. Where again, I quoted this earlier, but out of Proverbs, it says, honor the Lord with your wealth and the first fruit of your increase. And what that does right there, Alec, is it ties into the principle of thankfulness. I suppose thankfulness is a cornerstone of a healthy honor, because you can look at someone else and see what they've given you.
Mm.
Uh, Children naturally, they can grow out of it, but they naturally defer to their parents and to their elders, not just because the elders are bigger when they're children, as opposed to the children, but because the parents feed them, they clothe them, they keep them out of the weather. And so there's a sense that these elders have given me something that has made my life better. They've taken care of me. So there's deference to it, there's care to it, there's a respect that says these people fill a position in my life that I cannot ignore without it affecting both my relationship with God and ultimately, Alec, I think it affects every other relationship you've got.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Having grown up, and I just want to refer to, especially even to my culture, indigenous people, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm pretty sure it's the same in America as it is in Canada. And one of the things, and they call this one of the core teachings amongst the indigenous people is to honor the elders. And to me, just by what I've seen, because I've grown up on a First Nations reservations here in Canada, actually in Ontario. I you know I began to hear this terminology, being said so very often, but I kind of see that we've really missed even the substance of it, or the because I find it to be very cliche
Mm.
mostly nowadays. We need to honor the elders, but and that's one of the reasons why I was asking you that was because I don't really think that we say these words, but do we really know how to honor the elder, or even something as simple as a parent, as your mother, your father? And so, just thinking along those lines, Pastor, is have we? We're so good at lip service,
Right.
but yet at the same time, I find that maybe in the context of Canada and America, have we become a culture of dishonor based on what we've seen on the news media and social media? And what have we become? Do you see more dishonor nowadays as never before?
I do. I do. I don't know that I've ever laid claim to the idea that they said this when I was a kid, that it's harder to raise children in the 1960s than it was in the 1940s and the 1980s and it was in the 1960s and the 2010s and it was in the 2000s. There's got to be some truth to it. But the element of rebellion and resistance has always been alive in the following generation who
Mhm.
did not want to do what they were told.
Yeah.
Like again, if we come back and look at where it starts, where honor starts, it starts in its comparisons to God the Creator, building, setting up, planning the system of the planet and putting man into it. So at its root, it's got to do with acknowledgement.
Mm.
It's got to do with its acknowledgement. Romans chapter 1, it's got a litany of things that ought not to be done by people. And it says, I think there's four different occasions where it says, and he gave them over, and he gave them over, and he gave them up to this. You can
Mhm.
see humankind descending into, according to God's perspective, ever deeper, more degrading, more harmful human relationships. But it all begins up earlier in the chapter when it says, when they knew God, they neither honored or glorified him as God, same idea, same word, or were thankful to him. Thanksgiving and honor go together. So there's a place where we say, if we're going to honor God, if you're going to honor the elders, it ultimately, level playing field, is that you have to do what the elders tell you. That
Mm.
means you think their words way more than your words.
Mm.
That their opinions are more reasoned and more solid than yours. So at some point when all the talking's done, if they're really the elder, they get to decide what you think is right. You
Mm.
don't get to decide what you think is right.
That's right. That's right. I've because I've and wasn't too sure if I was going to go in this direction, but I've worked in schools before, and and just hearing even some of these kids' stories, and just seeing how they behave, and it fits so wonderful with this topic that you and I are talking about is. Um, I'm kind of hesitant to even try to go in this direction because I just really find, Pastor, that it's really I'm really am beginning to see a higher level of dishonor in our nation of Canada, and I kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit here for a few moments when it comes to our local authorities or our federal authorities, because and I'm sure you would agree with me that it's so easy to agree with somebody that it's so easy to honor somebody that we agree with. And the reason why I say that, because I think sometimes when we're going to choose, because we sometimes we become a people that we're only going to honor those that we agree with, and we're going to dishonor with those that we disagree with, you know.
Yeah.
And
I would say that's not even actually honor. I know
yeah,
exactly what you're saying, but
yeah,
if you honor only those, Jesus said, if you love only those who love you,
yeah,
what thanks do you get?
mm,
You're just like everybody else. So if you honor only those who honor you, he said in another place, you can't receive honor that comes from God because you pursue honor that comes from man. It's a well of a subject. It's a very deep and it's an important subject. I'm glad you chose it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's more dishonoring today than it was then. You are exactly right.
mm,
People are more emboldened to be dishonoring. It seems to be more someone's right to
right,
speak up, and you hear the phrase, "I can have an opinion too.
mm,
My opinion matters." Well, probably technically it does, but only a fool would think his opinion was as important as, for instance, God's, or his opinion was as important as the expert.
mm,
You might have an opinion, but that doesn't mean you're right.
yeah,
That's not a standard. An opinion is not a standard of truth.
right, absolutely. I it's funny you mentioned that because I think I got it right when you said that just because you have an opinion doesn't make it right.
Yeah, I said
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and I'm my mind is going in all different directions, and I want to try to stay on this topic. But would you agree that because we seem to have a constant uprising of protests nowadays? Like how would you tie all this into the idea of honor?
Uh, okay, I'm gonna back up again. I don't want to sound like a broken record or a one thought fellow, but so keep steering me around. But earlier in Romans 1, I mentioned Romans 1, and I linked how honoring God or glorifying God, nor we're thankful to Him, show up in the same sentence. The ideas are companion thoughts.
Hmm,
When you honor God with your tithe, what you're saying is you're not just giving an offering, you're not just giving money. You're saying that what I've got came from you, and whether it's going to meet all of my needs or not, or do everything I want it to, I want to take this moment and say, I know you gave me this. You're the same God that put the fruit on the trees before Adam needed to eat them.
hmm,
So I know that you made advanced provision for me, and this is my provision. I admit that you gave this to me, and I've got enough faith to go beyond what I think it will do or not do, and I'm thankful to you for it.
hmm,
So there's a connection between thanksgiving and honor.
hmm,
You said in your note that you sent to me, you said something along the order, and I was trying to look it up a moment ago, but you said something along the order of is there honor in society? Is it a dishonorable society? It's much like you just asked, and I
yeah,
think it is, and I think you can make a case for it being dishonorable because it's not a thankful society.
hmm,
It's
right,
not a grateful society, and it's not a grateful society, thankful, because Thanksgiving is not really taught, not even taught at home. So when we get out into the public arena, instead of being able to balance the reality that we see, there are things that need to be corrected, there are things that need to be addressed. But even with the government that you mentioned, there's government was instituted by God.
yeah,
While we might not all like the person sitting in the chairs of government. The idea is that God set it up.
Yep.
And God himself puts one in and takes one down. So God set government up. And if I despise the person sitting in the chair, he doesn't have my political persuasions, then I'm also in jeopardy of despising the God that put the chair there for him to sit into
Oh, wow.
and that put the guy in the chair. So
Hmm.
that's where it goes bad, is that I have to be able to say, as you mentioned, I've got to be able to honor and be thankful for people who aren't like me and admit that God might be bigger than what my opinions are.
That's right. And that's the reason why I asked that question was because I see it all over social media. I mean, seems to be there's this derogatory, this defaming of political figures nowadays, and I'm sure you've seen it many times because um, and that's all part of the dishonoring as a nation, particularly in Canada, because Lord knows that I've begun to disagree with a lot of the decisions that have been made, especially in Canada. And I mean, social media and the internet and the news media have had a field day, especially when President Trump was elected. And up until a point where, as soon as he was elected, and then, that kind of gave all kinds of people, platforms. And again, I know you would agree with me when I say that social media has done a fantastic job of giving everybody a voice. But I think it also has kind of put us in a dangerous place because we now have a voice when it comes to social media.
Correct. I
And
would agree.
we've it basically opened up the door. I'm glad you mentioned the idea of having an opinion, but now I see it all over. Like everybody seems to just have an opinion about Trump or Trudeau and all this stuff. And to me, I find it very dishonoring.
It is dishonoring. And I don't, again, want to waste your time, but I happened to be at a prayer breakfast a couple of years ago. Yeah, the national prayer breakfast, and the prime minister was there, and the leader of the opposition was there,
Hmm.
and it was really good. PM stood up and read a portion of scripture. I can still remember what he read. He read out of Matthew 7 about building your house on the foundation, and I don't know how completely he believed it, but he seemed convicted to me when he read it. He seemed like he thought it was the truth. Everyone did.
Yeah.
So when the PM stood up to speak, now this is primarily a group of maybe 700 leaders or pastors or older Christians that have been around for years in prayer meetings and things that have come, but it's primarily a leadership type of a meeting. When the PM stood up to speak, he got a very tepid and a modest greeting from all these basically conservative minded leaders. When the leader of the opposition stood up, they all but gave him cat calls like they were at a football game. I happened to be looking at the prime minister's face when they did it, and I saw the hurt, I saw the
Mm.
anger, and the humiliation.
Yeah.
Because what it said to me was that a bunch of grown-ups sitting in the room were saying, "Yeah, sure, we'll pray for you, Prime Minister, but we're really going to pray for this guy."
Hmm.
I thought they made us all look bad.
Yeah.
I thought it was a partiality that was the scripture tells us not to play up to. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I do agree with you. I don't think, and this is tough, Alec. You may have communications breakdowns right now and lose me right here,
Mhm.
but I don't think just because you have an opinion means that God wants you to share the opinion.
That's right.
I don't think that just because you have a platform is tantamount to God saying, "I want you to use this platform."
Yeah.
I don't think that every person on the planet is destined to hear my voice or my opinions.
Hmm.
I don't think, I think if I tried to speak to every person on the planet, maybe I could win a different kind of a following. But what would I have to do to keep that following? What would I have to do? What would I have to say to keep that following? How would that following shape what I believed and who I was to become? We're all intricately woven together like threads in a fabric, a jacket, a coat, a cloak, a magnificent coat of many colors. We're supposed to augment and flavor the people around us. We're not necessarily all destined to be the dominant color or the dominant thread of the garment.
Mhm. That's right. And I really appreciate that whole thought because this kind of backtrack a little bit about what we've already bed talking about that it's so easy to agree with politicians or political figures that have our own best interests in mind, and
Yeah,
it would be so easy to honor that political figure. But and I want to just highlight maybe just this one verse, and I know that you've probably read it many times, is that Peter talks about honor the king,
yeah,
right? Now, it's interesting to me because this was written by Peter during a time of great persecution.
correct.
And I mean, he's not writing it while on vacation and everything is
That's
just
right.
hunky-dory, right? This was
Yep,
during a time of great persecution under the great Caesars of Rome. And here is Peter addressing his audience, his readers. You know what? You still got to honor the king. You may not agree with what he's doing. He's killing Christians. He may not agree with him, but what he's by the way he conducts himself and his behavior and all that. But still, you got to honor the king.
that's correct.
Right?
That's correct. Now the question would be why?
Why?
So using my term again, uh, I might have liked I might have liked the policies that the leader of the opposition stood for more than I liked the prime minister. But this was the prime minister's prayer breakfast.
Hmm.
The idea was for the opportunity to show a force of strength and faith that says whether we agree with you or not, we recognize the position you're in. We don't know how you got there. We don't know how long you'll be there. We don't know that it's fair that you're there, but we recognize that you're there and that God's let you be there. So to not respect you might be one thing, but to dishonor you puts me in a position to dishonor the God that put you there and it
Hmm.
set the entire system up. So when
Hmm.
Peter says honor the king, he's not saying we all agree with everything he did, but he knows that if he lets that spirit of dishonor go rampant in the church without trying to speak against it, that the dishonor will lead to confusion and chaos and self will that will ultimately form a chasm between those believers and the other believers around them. Because it's pretty easy to say, well, I don't like the prime minister, but on the other hand, I don't like the pastor, and I don't like the pastor's wife, and I don't like the elders in the church. It's the same spirit.
Hmm.
So it's got to be consistent from top to bottom, from side to side. He
No,
would have
right.
known that had the seeds of the destruction of the church built right into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely imperative for every level of life, right? From politics to church life, even to your own personal life when it comes to your mother, your father, your grandparents, and the elders, and those that are well in age beyond you, and it all has the same. We all reap the same benefits
Correct.
honor. Now, Pastor, I kind of want to switch gears here a little bit, and I want to talk particularly in the area of the church itself, because I know that we have pastors, leaders, elders, and I don't know if he would go as far as apostles and evangelists, pastors, and all that, um, because I kind of want to talk a little bit about this idea of titles. Now, I'm not a very big proponent on the idea of titles. I mean, I don't really carry one myself, but other people have referred to me as so and so, and I don't really care too much about that. But from my own life story and the way that I was brought up, I was taught to refer to people by their title. whether it be Pastor so-and-so, because I know I refer to you as Pastor David because, I honor the position that you're in as a pastor. And I also attended a school that and I know this is something that's still being played out in many schools today, even in the public school, that we don't refer to our teachers as by their first name. We refer to them as Mr. McGrew or Mr. Capay, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you probably grown up in that area as well, but maybe somewhere along the lines that this is where familiarity can lure its ugly head up at some point. And would you be able to describe to us what is your definition of familiarity?
Oh, that's brilliant, Alec. Uh, Alec, if you think about it for just a tick in English, and this is where we're talking, uh, the word family and the word familiarity are fundamentally the same memes or the same word, and so they share meaning. I can't recall the book, so maybe this is not the setting to say it, but just briefly, I read a portion of an excerpt book a number of years back, and the remark is that up until about up until about 150 years ago now, the people in your home were your family, even if they were the people that worked in your home. They were the ones that you were familiar with.
Yeah.
So we've all heard, at least I think we have. I know people of my generation have heard the statement many times: familiarity breeds contempt.
Hmm.
But that's not in the book of Proverbs. That was the wisdom of Aesop in one of Aesop's fables. And while you might on the surface think that was true, I don't think when it's examined that it is. I think contempt breeds contempt and
Hmm.
uses familiarity to do it. Because if all familiarity bred contempt, then you would be doomed. It would be destructive to ever get familiar with anyone. The more you knew your wife, the more you would despise her. The more your kids knew their parents, the more they would despise you. If it was as simple as intimate knowledge breeding contempt, then society is doomed to fail.
Hmm.
But if it's something other, like the spirit that we view each other in, the faith that we view each other in, the love that we view each other in, all biblical attributes, then you can realize that with familiarity as an extension of your faith, of your love, of your Christianity, you can be tremendously enriched by the lives of the people around you, enlarged and learn. You can grow. You can become. They can help you to become. What I always say to everybody that I'm trying to teach and train is, I haven't done everything right, but it's taken me to like 50 years to get to this point of ministry. I've got 45 years in ministry. What I'd really like to do is help you learn something that took me 10 years to learn, to help you come to terms with it in 2 years,
Hmm.
so that you can be sped along and you can exceed and go beyond where I'm at. That's what you want for your kids. That's what you want. That's what every pastor wants for the people in his church, is for the intimacy. And you can't do that without familiarity, because in that process, I have to say, in some sophisticated way at least, these are some of my mistakes. This is where I was wrong. This is what I learned. Even if you just say, this is what I learned, you've already admitted that you didn't know it before. So it's not going to take an engineer to figure out what you did wrong. So if you're always living in a realm that have got firm, hard lines of demarcation that you can't cross, you're the pastor, so I can never be intimate with you.
Hmm.
You're the parent, so there's just things I'm never going to ask you. You're the teacher, so you're always better than I am. Then you're going to be doomed to a certain kind of ignorance, stagnation
Hmm.
that will keep you stalled out and from being able to grow.
Hmm.
So I would agree with you. I think there's some small place for titles in some context, some small place to remember your manners and call somebody by their title, to show the honor that you're right off the bat. You're the doctor. I'm not the doctor.
Hmm.
So you're the doctor. I'm going to let you teach me. I'll let you tell me what to do. Then I may come back and question why you told me that, but right off the bat, I'm receiving you as I believe the way God sent you to me.
Hmm.
And that requires the willingness to reach into some intimacy and to get to know people. And that always brings a certain healthy familiarity with it.
That's right. That's right. I I want to hear actually I want to hear your thoughts on this. Um, when it comes to like you mentioned about titles and positions and and because I think I think we can become so familiar with this because the thought that came to me, and I'm not sure if you've heard this uh, terminology before. I know I heard it said years ago that if you cannot if you have a hard time honoring the person, then honor the position.
I think you've captured the whole idea in a nutshell. It's
Mm.
not the person. Respect goes to the person. The person's either a good king or a bad king. He can be respected or disrespected for it. But the position is where the honor attaches.
Mm.
So in the example I gave earlier, if I'd had a conversation to speak to the prime minister, I would have apologized to him, but I wouldn't have called him Justin.
Mm.
I would have said, I would have called him prime minister. And my conversation coming from where I came from would have been a lot of eye looking, and there would have been a lot of sirs and yes sirs and no
Yes.
sirs that went with it, irrespective of whether I agreed with him or not. The man is in a position I will never be in, and I've got to admit in my relationship with God that He's there for me. He's there for me as an extension of God's will.
Yeah. 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 And I know that you would agree with me when I say that, our reflection of respect and honor towards authoritative figures is a reflection of our relationship towards God. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with it.
Mm.
Uh, Not time for a Bible lesson, but in Philippians, Paul is very thankful for the Philippians, and you'll be familiar with this. I would think most of your audience would be too, Alec. But it says at the end of the chapter 4, it says, "I thank my God that you revived your care." Now
Mm.
think with this for just a second. Why would I thank God because you revived your care? The only reason I would thank God is because I saw you as an extension of God's reaching into my life.
Mm.
And in thanking God for them, he's thanking them, but he's also aware that God's using them. So uh, I thank God for my father and mother. My father and mother were, like I said, very human, but they were as good as they knew how to be.
Right.
But they were also God's provision for my life. So to not be thankful for them is for me to say, God, I don't appreciate what you gave me. You
Mm.
gave me second class. That alters my relationship with God.
Yeah. I love how I really do love how you've really begun to make all these connections because it's so very important for us for us to really all understand the importance and the dynamics of honoring. Now we're not just talking about honoring those within authoritative positions,
Correct.
but it's just all about maybe honoring one another, because I think it was what Paul said in Romans, where he says that esteem those more than yourselves. And that word esteem does have a connotation towards honoring,
It
right?
does.
So we honor others more than more than ourselves.
And
Because
that doesn't diminish us at all.
no,
It doesn't say honor yourself less. It just says honor them more.
right, right. And because I know you probably seen this many times, and I see this. I seem to see this thing happening nowadays because I hear about all these different workshops and these different conferences that I see so many on social media, and it's going to be posted, on Facebook and wherever. Um, there seems to be this high growing interest in this thing called, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, and not to say that it's wrong, but it's this self-love and this self-care. Where would you go in that with that?
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm almost 73 years old, so I'm going to have been schooled in different veins of thought and values. I think in principle, though there are exceptions, I think in principle that the more I make concern for myself to be the fundamental value of my life, the unhappier I will become.
Hmm.
I think that life is intended primarily, Paul said again to the Corinthians, I'm ready to spend and be spent for
Hmm.
you. Oh, Corinthians, my heart's enlarged to you, yours is shrunk up, but be like I am, enlarge your heart. So I think life is intended to learn, and part of what you learn is to learn how to love, and that requires you to mostly put other people first
Hmm.
and to measure your care and what you need inside that context of what you're pouring out for other people.
That's right.
I think if you spend all your life looking after yourself, you'll end up with nobody but you in your life.
Wow. Wow. I I wish we could spend, maybe another hour just even talking about that alone, because the verse that I was referring to in Romans, I think it's in chapter 3 somewhere, that that word esteem yourself, esteem others highly than yourself, because I hear that word so very often, is this self-esteem. Now, I don't know if there's really anything wrong with the word itself, and I do know that there's a there is a time for that, right? You do need to care for yourself,
I
but
agree.
but when it becomes when it becomes when it becomes your only thing
Yeah.
that you're investing in.
Well, it's the core value.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said, I see it everywhere. There seems to be this growing interest and the idea of self-esteem, self-love, self-care, and there is a time for that, absolutely. But there's just something that is so right and so incredibly valuable for us as human beings, not just Christian people, but as human beings, that we honor one another,
Yes. Yeah.
love one another,
Yeah.
respect one another. And
You,
and I see a very lack of it, especially in today's society.
I would agree. You mentioned esteem, and the second that you did, I thought of Paul's companion statement in Ephesians chapter 5. It's a wonderful passage about marriage where he says in verse 20, I think it is, it might be 21, but I think it's 20. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. It didn't say wives be submitted. It said wives, submit yourself. So that's something they have to offer to give. But the very verse in front of it, and usually there's a chapter break there, I think it's verse 19, says, all of you submit to one another.
Hmm.
So even in a marriage context, husband and wife, it's not just about wives submitting to their husbands. That's within a picture of the husband already being submitted to his wife. It's got a certain mutuality to it. Well, you won't ever submit to someone that you don't honor.
Hmm.
You'd be afraid.
Hmm.
Honor takes care of being afraid.
Wow. Wow. I love that.
Yeah. There are things
Yeah.
to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, we we
I
tend we tend
there's so many different things that I really want to dive into, because but I kind of want to close off with this last final thought, Pastor, is um and I kind of had it right there. I was thinking about it. I'm gonna pause because I'm gonna edit this out later on. Um Again, I'm gonna fix this in the recording. but there's this, I know that we kind of touched on it a little bit. Um, it's this idea of titles because, well, you know Pastor Brent, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I know for a fact that I would never call him Brent,
yeah,
or I would never call him Barb, or
yeah.
call her Barb, right? And but anyway, I kind of want to just close off. I want to close off on this final thought, Pastor, because I was walking, I was working in this one particular mine up north here in Saskatchewan, and we were going to be visited by a very high-end dignitary because he wanted to kind of see how business was going, and it was actually the Governor General
Yeah.
that was paying us a visit,
Very
and
cool.
they had specifically told us as workers there if if the governor general happens to walk by you and greets you and wants to shake your hand, um, you are never to refer him as so and so. I forget who it was at the time that was in there. Um, the term that we were specifically told to use was Your Excellency, and we were not to use any other word besides that. And I'm not sure what the consequences would have been had we not, but we never I never ended up seeing this person
Yeah.
on site. But I kind of want to just maybe just end off on this final thought, Pastor, and then maybe you can highlight it, comment on it a little bit further. But for me myself as a person, I choose because I think it's the most is the honorable thing to do, it's the respectful thing to do, is to refer to, let's say, for instance, my pastor. I refer to him as Pastor Brent. I refer to her as Pastor Barb. And I know that other people, even like yourself, I'm going to refer to you as Pastor David because I've actually had guests on my show that I would refer to them as Doctor So and So, Pastor So and Reverend and so on. And some of them have tried to tell me it's okay. You can call me David. You can call me so and so. But I said, no, that's just not the way that I've been brought up.
Yeah.
So how do you connect this? Because I know it's tied into the idea of relationship and thankfulness and respect and honor. Titles are, I don't know. What do you think?
I think you bring up a good point on the other side of the question right there, because titles, particularly in that example you used about the governor general, that those are titles of accomplishment that someone's been awarded with for their performance.
Mhm.
Again, all through this conversation, we've laced the idea of you honor people for the role they fill. So it's an admission of the role. I would think if I was on a call, if I was talking to someone and I said, and I was talking about a pastor, and the pastor said, you have to call me pastor. And I said, I'm not going to call you pastor. You're just Bob. You're just Billy Joe, whoever you happen to be. I don't think it's the pastor that probably has the problem with the honor of the title. I would say it was me. And I think that there's always a place in a relationship where you have to make sure the boundaries are in place and that the other person knows that you know they are in place. You don't go through your life calling your wife wife or husband husband as a rule, but they are referred to in other conversations as my wife or as my husband. So it talks about the role that they fill. And again, as we close off here, there are biblical instructions about how you treat your wife, how you treat your pastor. So if I walked up to the prime minister and said, "Good afternoon, prime minister," I'm telling him that I know as a disciplined man, as a
Yeah.
disciplined Christian, there are prescribed ways to speak to him, and I'm going to use that prescription in my relationship with him. Right off the bat, I've opened up a door to be able to speak to him, to be able to listen to him and receive from him. And he knows that that bridge, that doorway is open so that we can communicate back and forth. So I'm not against titles.
Yep.
I do know that there's a place for them,
Mhm.
but I also know that there's a place of intimacy where there's also ground to be gained by knowing someone you respect
Yeah.
treats you on the same level as what they are. And that often ends up on a first name basis. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of communication between the beginning and the end. For me to call the Prime Minister Justin would take years to get to know him and have him trust me as well as me trust him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen.
I don't know if I would ever come in contact with the prime minister. I mean, it may come as sure happenstance, but if it ever, if I ever was given the opportunity, and like we've been saying throughout this whole conversation, Pastor, is that um, it's so easy for us to be caught up with what is being said about whether it be the prime minister or about certain political figures or even church leaders and the mega church leaders, right? Because
Mhm.
the internet and social media is just so rampant, just talking about one another and just degrading one another and just so showing that lack of respect and showing that lack of dishonoring towards so many people. And to be honest, because I've really I would honestly say, that I am one of the guilty ones. I would say, I find it difficult to honor somebody that I disagree with, right? And and not to say, that I have it all together. Just because I wanted to put the show together means, that I have it figured out, right? And because I don't. I mean, I'm gonna miss it somewhere, and we're all gonna miss it at some
We
point.
all are. We all
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. Because, but I do really find, that I think this is a very timely message when it comes to the idea of honor. Because, like I said, it's just for the most part, it's just lip service, and it's become so cliche,
Hmm.
and because. Um, we think we kind of use it in everyday language. Like to say, for instance, the judge, right? We say Your Honor, or when you ask somebody to do something, it's an honor for me to be here, or it's an honor for me to stand before you today, or even in a wedding party,
Yeah,
right? You become the maid of honor.
that's
Well, or what exactly is that, right?
yeah.
Or and it's like it's thrown out there. The word honor is basically just used in such I don't know, how would you define it? It's used in such uh
Careless, careless way.
yeah, yeah, like we don't really understand it, but we still use these words. And so I think that's why, conversations like this, to really us to fully understand what honor is that, it's basically just a valuing of other people.
It is, and particularly, Alec, it's a valuing of other people. Sometimes it says honor the brotherhood, love everyone. Sometimes it's as simple as just admitting that God's put people around you that He wants you to treat in a certain way.
Hmm.
But if you can't honor those around you, if you can't honor the prime minister, there'll probably be some opportunity for you to be dishonorable to yourself too.
Yeah.
By showing honor, you show you're worthy of honor. By showing honor, you show that you honor yourself.
Hmm.
It's not subservience. It's got a mutual respect to it.
Absolutely.
So we do throw it around, and it is dangerous to throw it around, particularly in the world of mass communications that we live in.
Hmm. Yep. Yep. Well, Pastor David, it's been an honor
It's been my
having you.
it's been my honor. I so enjoy speaking with you. I so enjoy the hunger I see in your
Mhm.
eyes and hear in your voice, and the fact that you think enough of me to reach out to me to have this conversation is immensely honorable
Yeah.
to me. I thank
Yeah.
God for it, and I thank God for you, and I thank God for those that are watching and listening. And I hope that somewhere, even if they didn't agree with everything, that there's something that's been said that God is able to enlarge their understanding
Yeah.
of fundamentally what starts and ends with their
Yes.
relationship with Him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to close with this final thought, Pastor, is that I've had so many guests talking, and for myself, I'm choosing to honor, the guests that come on here and share their thoughts, share their wisdom and their insight. And to tell you the truth, there's some things that I may not agree with,
Right.
but I am still choosing to honor you
That's right.
as a spiritual leader, as a pastor, as a teacher. And I'm not saying I didn't disagree, I disagree with anything here today, but that shouldn't deter us from
No,
being brothers and sisters and friends and colleagues just because of some simple doctrinal disagreement, right?
that's right.
I'm going to still choose to honor you
None,
as
none of
as
us
a
know
learning
everything.
person, right?
None of us know everything,
No,
and God's bigger.
yeah,
It's entirely possible and likely, Alec, that because of your position in your world, in your life, in your age, and mine, that the same God would have you have a different opinion than
mm,
what mine was
yeah,
because of the people you're going to meet and encounter and influence.
hmm,
That doesn't mean God's schizophrenic. It means truth is bigger than one simple application. And if
hmm.
you lose honor, you've put a limit on what kind of truth you can both receive and spread.
Wow, awesome. Pastor, like I said, there's so many different directions I know that you and I could have gone in, and so many things that we probably could have been talking about today because I know for a fact, Pastor, that there is just a wealth of knowledge that's just welling up inside of you, and I know that we could spend hours just talking, but I know that for the sake of time, that we're gonna have to kind of cut it there. But I just want to thank you once again for just appearing
Thank you.
on the show. And I just once again, I again, like I said, I just appreciate the wisdom and the knowledge that you share, even on the previous recording we did, and even today's conversation. And I'm definitely going to go back and read and listening to this again. And I know that those that are listening are going to be challenged, and I know that they're going to appreciate it.
I'm humbled and I'm thankful. And just so you know, we don't always have to be on the show together. If there's anything you ever want to talk about or you just want to visit, I'm always here, ready to make an occasion, an appointment so we can get together and talk or see each other. I have the highest hopes of who you are, what you're doing now, and what God's going to do with you in the future. I'm so thankful to be in this nation aligned with you and people like you to make Canada a little bit better, to make ourselves a little bit better as we all move towards that great and dreadful day where we see God for exactly as who He is.
Mhm.
I think you're great. I thank God for you.
No, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
I appreciate that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here again today. And be sure to check back for more episodes. And don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe button to stay up to date with all of our shows. We'll see you again next time. Bye bye.